today because it's spring break. I wasn't totally sure who would rather be here in chilly St. Louis in this ballroom rather than somewhere on the beach, but I'm so thrilled that the room is full, and I'm excited to talk to you today about a topic that I'm really passionate about, and I heard a lot of sounds when Shirley was talking about it, so I'm just really glad that you're here. I'm also always really thrilled to talk to a room filled with people who live at the intersection of strategy and people, which is a very fascinating and often a very complicated place to sit. I'm going to start by painting a story that you're probably familiar with. You're in a conversation in a meeting with senior leaders in your organization, and you're hearing things like, our managers just aren't stepping up. Execution isn't happening fast enough. It's inconsistent. No one here is taking full accountability. And you're thinking, might be because the people in this room sitting around the senior leadership table are not fully aligned on what we're here to do. But you feel like you can't quite say that, at least not so directly. And so the conversation shifts. It becomes about providing training to managers, right? At the end of the day, it's our managers need leadership training. And they probably do, right? Transitioning into management is a really hard transition for a lot of people, and it's not one that we do a great job of preparing people for. So it's probably true that managers do need upskilling. And it's also true that managers are operating under leadership conditions that they didn't create. And you as an HR leader are charged with solving a problem that originated in a room that you likely weren't sitting in, and a problem that you don't always feel fully empowered to challenge. And that problem is deeper than managers. And that problem I call leadership debt. So that's really the topic that we're here to talk about today. This is a growing body of thought leadership that I've been talking to lots of leaders about, but this is really the first time that I'm talking publicly in a room that looks like this about it. So I'm thrilled for you guys to be the first ones to take it in, and I will be so curious at the end to hear how it lands, how it resonates, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. And so before we get started, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a roadmap into where we're headed. Okay, first we're going to talk about what is leadership debt and how does it quietly build inside of your organizations. Second, we're going to talk about the antidote or the solution to leadership debt, which I call leadership maturity. And not only that, but the sequence in which we have to build leadership maturity in order to really support businesses as they scale. And number three, we're going to talk about the strategic role that you play as HR leaders in your organization in diagnosing and reducing leadership debt so that your companies can execute more effectively. I think that a really helpful way to think about leadership is to think about it like infrastructure. So think about a city that doubles in size in a mere few years, right? More businesses come in, more people move in, there's more cars, more everything, right? But the infrastructure doesn't evolve with the growth. So there's more buildings going up, but the roads all look the same, the bridges aren't fortified, and the systems don't evolve along with the growth. And everything seems to work fine at first, but over time, congestion starts to build. You start to see more traffic. Things just feel hard, right? And this is what happens inside of companies as they grow. We tend to invest in certain kinds of systems, but we often forget about the infrastructure that supports the people, that supports getting the work done inside of our companies. And this is what I call leadership debt. Leadership debt is the hidden liability that accrues inside an organization when growth outpaces leadership maturity. I'll read it again. Leadership debt is the hidden liability that accrues inside of an organization when growth outpaces leadership maturity. So this means the gap between where your organization is in terms of its growth trajectory and the infrastructure that we just talked about, right? That's there to support that growth. It's that gap that you see and you feel it every single day. So to contrast leadership debt with financial debt, because that's something that we're all familiar with financial debt, you borrow now and you pay later, and interest compounds over time. With leadership debt, we grow now and we do the work of building the support and the infrastructure to support that growth later, or maybe never. And friction compounds over time. So these are some of the common symptoms of leadership debt that HR leaders see. You might see executive misalignment. That looks a lot like leaders at the top not being completely on the same page or playing out of the same playbook in terms of strategic objectives. What is the work? How are we getting the work done? They might be stuck in firefighting mode. Strategy is not cascading down into the organization very effectively. There's also slow and inconsistent decision making. So a lot of times leaders will circle the wagon over and over again, but not reach a decision and not move anything forward. That creates bottlenecks at the top and confusion down below. We also see leadership burnout a lot because these symptoms that I just described are very tiring. They're very exhausting. And so that can lead to a lot of pressure, but without the systems to support the work, people become burned out. We also see a lot of stalled execution. So lack of clarity in terms of strategic direction will lead to swirl, confusion, friction. That creates more friction in downstream layers of the organization. So managers are not clear on their direction. They have a hard time executing strategy that's not clear or hasn't been clearly articulated to them. That creates confusion, chaos, and again, more firefighting. And ultimately, it's going to strain the culture. So the lack of systems above are going to lead to lack of engagement and also resistance to change. And that's especially problematic in a world that is changing very, very quickly, as we know. So just by show of hands, how many people are experiencing 2 or more of any of the symptoms that I just talked about in their organization? It's a safe space. And this isn't surprising, right? Because as HR leaders, you see these symptoms first, right? You're the ones who have the clear line of sight into all these symptoms. And sometimes it's frustrating because not everyone sees it the way that you do. So when these symptoms develop, it's not one obvious problem that's happening. These develop as a pattern. They happen together, right? And although you can see it, they appear typically downstream from where the leadership debt actually develops. But they're all connected. And so the question then is, how do we diagnose it? How do we know where it starts? So this is our model of leadership debt. And it starts at the top. Leadership debt always starts at the top and it cascades its way down. So the symptoms appear in layers down below, but it originates from the top. And when left unaddressed, leadership debt will compound over time and it will slow growth. So just to break this down a little bit further, we have business growth either as a reality or as an objective, and then leadership systems that are failing to evolve along with that growth. And that starts with the executive team. So many executive teams are misaligned. And I can say this with 100% certainty because I work with them every day, all day. And this model that we've created is really based on nearly 2 decades of working with leaders to solve business and people problems. So this is really our effort at articulating what is happening inside organizations that we see over and over and over again. So starting with the executive team, that's a system, right? We don't think about that as a system. We think about grouping together a bunch of really smart executive leaders who have a lot of experience in their functional area. And that's amazing. But having an executive team that's fully aligned and that's really charged up and playing out of the same playbook and inspiring and leading the rest of the organization is so much more than that. We can't just cobble together a group of highly qualified executive leaders. We have to build a system around them that makes the rest of the organization run in a way that feels smooth, in a way that enables smooth scaling. And when we don't do that, that looks a lot like siloing. It looks a lot like executive leaders who are more focused, more dedicated to their functional area than to the needs of the organization and to helping create strategy, craft strategy, look out ahead. Who's climbing the tree with the CEO, right? The world is too complex to have one heroic leader these days. So we really need a fully empowered team, a system around the team that's able to ascertain and articulate what is the work and how are we going to get the work done together? And how are we going to cascade that clarity, that strategic clarity, into our organization in a way that inspires people to do their best work, in a way that communicates clearly what we expect of them and empowers them, right, to be accountable and hold themselves and others accountable. So that's really where it starts. And then when that's not happening, you have under-equipped senior leaders. So executives and senior leaders, from an individual standpoint, don't always have the skill to lead people effectively. So that's where it breaks down from the team to the individual. And when that's not happening, you've got overwhelmed managers. And of course they're overwhelmed because they don't have the clarity or the skill that they need to do their job effectively. And then at the organizational level, when all of these systems above are not developed, when that infrastructure is missing, it creates communication breakdowns, it creates execution drag, culture strain, and change resistance, right? Which again is a major problem in today's world. So I want to do a quick pulse check. So we are building out a really neat tool that actually measures leadership debt. And I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to be the first ones to pilot that tool. It's called the Leadership Debt Index. This is a modified version of that. So the opportunity to test it will come at the end. That's totally optional. But for right now, this is just a modified version just to get a quick pulse check. You guys have probably used Menti before. There's two ways to access this. So if you take out your phone, you can either, oh, it's saying connection lost. So hopefully that will not create problems for us. Where's my friend Tim? I don't know where Tim went, but let's just see if it works. Okay, if you've got your phone, you should be able to scan the QR code, but it may not be working now because we have this banner here saying that the connection is lost. So try to go to menti.com, www.menti.com, and type in this code, 54975127, and it should populate with a question screen. It's working? Oh, that's not the right QR code, actually. Yeah, that's a different QR, but thank you. Oh. Okay. Should I refresh? If I refresh, yeah? Uh-oh. I can just skip it if you need to. Okay. Okay. Okay, so we're going to skip that. Luckily, I have a PDF, so it's all good. Okay, here's what we're going to do, though. Instead of doing the Menti, let's just do this, because I do want to do like a quick pulse check. Okay, why don't you just take like 2 minutes to talk at your table about where you feel like your organization is in terms of its leadership debt on a scale of 1 to 10 or 0 to 10, right? 0 meaning we have no leadership debt, we have A+. A+ on all of these systems. Executive team is good, we have leadership capacity and clarity at every level, and we have a healthy organizational culture that is very effective in terms of communication and change readiness and all the things. And a 10 is we have a lot of leadership debt. We're basically getting an F. Okay? So just generally speaking, and there's no judgment here, we're just trying to get a pulse check. Just talk amongst yourselves for just a couple minutes about where you think your organization is in terms of its leadership debt. Okay, one more minute. Let's start wrapping it up. Okay, I'd love to hear from just a couple of tables. Sorry, I'm getting walk this way. I'd love to hear from just a couple of tables on what you guys discussed. You don't have to call out your organization or anybody else's organization, but I'd love to just hear from a couple volunteers what you guys talked about at your table in terms of where you're seeing leadership debt. Any brave volunteers? Yes.
I would say we're like half and half with 7s and some 3s. And the main thing is people are afraid of change. A lot of manual work still, but some are just really with it. Just need a few things updated, and but boy, some of the companies really need people to retire so that some new things can come in place.
Okay. So your name is Talisha. Talisha shared that at her table they talked about. They identified that their organizations are a little bit split. Some are around a 3, some are around a 7. There's a lot of resistance to change happening inside. Some people feel like there's some good momentum happening. Is that right? And then there's some very tenured leadership that potentially could make space for others. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. How about another volunteer? I heard somebody over here. Great.
So for us at our table, it depended on the size of the organization. So the smaller the organization, if it had like 50 employees, they were a little bit more open and there was more communication as to what needed to be changed or adapted to. Or if it's a larger organization where there's different units that do different things, people were more comfortable inside their individual department. But as far as the organization as a whole, the alignment was off.
Yeah. So she said, did everybody hear her? She said that it depended on the size of the organization. So for some organizations that are smaller, 50 or less people, it felt like the communication was really strong. They were really open with each other. And for organizations that are bigger, it tends to feel a little bit more siloed into departments, and those communication channels just aren't quite there, right? Which makes sense because that's exactly what happens. As organizations grow, those systems don't evolve. And so whereas you might just have the capability to be organically open and talking to Joe at the water cooler in the lunchroom, and maybe that's sufficient when you're a 50 or less person organization, as you grow, that doesn't work anymore, right? But the system doesn't evolve with the growth. So that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing that. Do we have one more volunteer? Yes.
I don't know if this is like one of the top items on your list, but I would say there's again with tenured associates, they aren't really open. They're like, let's just keep it's working as it is, and they don't want to invest in this kind of thing. Like I think our management, upper management cares about this, their team and everything, but there's just not time to do anything. And then if there is, I think I get kind of discouraged from my leader about, we don't want to go that route. So leaders are not open to that. So then I'm like, well, so we stay here forever. So, and then also, I don't know, it's my fault that I'm, younger. I don't have many years in the, in the field. And so I have ideas and I'm not, pessimistic yet. Like I'm too, want to improve things. I don't know.
No, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. And my goal here today really is to help you feel more empowered in engaging in these conversations with your organization. So, and that goes for people who have lots of tenure and for whom this just hasn't been a comfortable conversation, and for people who have less tenure. Thank you very much to all the volunteers for sharing that, and apologies that the technology went out on us right when we were about to do the poll. Welcome to HR, right? Right. Okay, so once we know where the leadership debt lives, and I really appreciate that you guys were talking not just about numbers like, oh, I'm at a 7, but where in the organization does that show up, right? Like, where is it concentrated? So once we understand where it lives, then the next question becomes, how do organizations build leadership maturity in a way that actually supports growth? How do we build that? Yes.
Would like to proudly say, not to brag, but proudly say, I've developed our first internal leadership development program, and it has, we can measure it. Our metrics show that the people are growing. Our production is increasing in certain areas, but it's also very telling of those who are not up to the challenge. It separates the boys from the men, or the girls from the women. You know, it's very insightful, and all levels are invited to come, from the chiefs down to people who are just the lowest level of whatever we hire.
Great. Tell me your name.
Carissa.
Carissa just launched a leadership development program that's going very well, so let's give her a round of applause. Amazing. Okay, so how do we build leadership maturity in a way that actually supports growth? And it might include leadership development programs, but that's not all of it, right? So here's our model of leadership maturity. Organizations can overcome leadership debt by building leadership systems that scale. I really want you to start thinking about all of this systemically, right? Not as just a program here, but we're building systems that scale with the business. We have to start by aligning the executive team. So this is a top-down, flipped it upside down, bottom-up approach, because without an aligned executive team, the ground on which your entire organization is standing is really unstable. And so that's really the foundation. We have to start there. We also have to grow leadership capacity at every level, right? From the executives on down to the front line. We have to figure out what are the skills and the behaviors that people need at every level, and let's create the programs to get them the skills, right? That requires a lot of clarity on what we're trying to do first. And then ultimately, that's going to enable a culture that feels healthy, where communication is strong, because you've built systems for communication. You have clarity that can trickle its way down and cascade out. And people feel good, they feel connected to the purpose and the mission. And your organization is ready for change because you are able to articulate why you're changing and how it's connected to your purpose. So these are really the three tiers, the three main tiers, and the right sequence in which we need to build leadership maturity. So just to break that down a little bit further, we really need to start with a commitment to systems. So evolving systems as your organizations are growing, starting first with an aligned executive team. That looks like having a system around that team that does not depend on the individual leaders that sit on that team, but a process for defining over and over and over again, as the world is changing every single day, what is the work and how are we going to get the work done? And then once we have that clarity, how are we going to push that out to the rest of our organization in a way that is clear, in a way that's compelling, and in a way that is very inspiring? And then we need executive leaders that model the leadership behaviors that we're training other people to model, right? We need the executive leaders to model those behaviors. And I can tell you, and I'm sure that you all can attest to, that that does not always happen. It doesn't always happen. And that's a major breakdown. And then managers need the clarity on what they're expected to do and how they're expected to behave, and also the skills to lead. Because without it, you can't expect managers to execute a strategy that's unclear to them, right? They are not capable of doing that. That's not a realistic expectation. And then when all those systems are working and building together to support growth, then you have streamlined communication, strong performance, committed employees who are engaged and accountable. You've got a healthy culture. and you can articulate what's happening and why and when, and so you're preparing your organization to be really change ready. So I want to talk a little bit about the inverted investment problem, which for us is really where we see organizations getting this wrong over and over and over again. So on the left, I have where companies typically invest, and on the right, where companies should invest, or at least in which sequence they should invest. So typically, companies invest first in manager training. And by the way, I should point out, like, we do all of this, so I am not criticizing the things at the top of this ladder. We do it all. It's all important. It's all critical, but we have to do it in the right sequence. And we also respect and appreciate that different organizations have a different appetite for change and for learning and for growth, and different leaders have a different appetite for it. And so there are different entry points, and I just want to name that. I have an idea of the best way to move the needle the furthest, to make the biggest impact with the greatest ROI. And we respect and appreciate that every organization is a little bit different. The DNA of your organization is different. And so there are different entry points. And we're happy to meet you where you are, right? So I think that's important to say. So getting back to this though, typically companies will invest first in manager training, right? HR, please go fix the manager problem. Let's pour money into that. And some of those programs are very successful, right? We've done many of them ourselves, and I have a case study that I'm going to share with you in a minute that kind of highlights what I'm talking about. Leadership programs, cohort-based leadership programs, love it. Culture initiatives. I cannot tell you how many times I get called to do a culture workshop. Like, I can't change your culture in an hour. I wish I could. I truly wish I could. And then last, always last, rare if ever, is really investing in executive alignment and really fortifying the executive team. So we want to flip this upside down. The way to move the needle the fastest, the furthest, and with the strongest ROI is to invest first in your executive team and their alignment. Everything else comes after that. After that comes executive and senior leadership development, and then manager capacity, right? Skill building, and then focus on culture, communication, and change readiness. And some of these things can happen in parallel, they overlap, they're all, kind of part and parcel of the same. But I do want to get you to start thinking about this in a more systemic way. So I'd love for you to take a few more minutes and just talk amongst yourselves at your table about, why do you think we have this inverted investment problem? Why do companies invest first in manager training and leadership development programs, and last, if ever, in their executive teams? Why do you think that is? So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to talk about that amongst yourselves, and I will be circulating and calling on volunteers.
our fancy straws.
Oh, thanks. Oh, it wasn't in presentation mode. It wasn't in presentation mode. But then I got it, right? Are you serious right now?
You're paying me for this. I don't owe you any money for my like my physical
No, what you're saying. It's very
This guy was very much
I'm just eavesdropping.
We're having a discussion about the awareness, the lack of awareness of the issue,
Yes.
and that's really common.
Yes. Yeah. 100%.
There's people that they need help.
Yeah, it is sort of like you can't see the spinach in your own teeth, right?
Yeah,
It's,
right.
yeah. But a lot of times it's HR who sees it, and then it's difficult to be like, there's a lot of dysfunction happening here. Yeah. Oh, you think it's a them problem? I don't think so. Yeah. So it's a tricky spot to be in. It truly is. Okay, let's start wrapping up. And I'd love to hear from a couple of tables what you guys have talked about. Why do you think we have an inverted investment problem? Any volunteers? Why does this table think we have an inverted investment problem? Any thoughts?
Quick fixes.
Quick fixes. Okay, quick fixes are easier. Yes, I'm coming over. Yes, Becky, what do you guys think?
We had a great chat about the lack of awareness. So I think a lot of leaders don't understand the misalignment and accountability is not there. And so that I think that's one of the reasons.
Okay, Becky said it's an awareness problem. So a lot of leaders don't understand, they don't have the awareness of a misaligned executive team, for instance, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yes, and they need more awareness. Great. What else? It sounded like a lot of interesting conversations. Yes, Wendy.
Well, I think it's easier to kick the problem downstream, right? So if we address the problem with the solutions on the left, then we don't have to look at our own stuff.
Right. So Wendy shared that it's easier to kick the problem downstream. So if we just invest in the things on the left, then we don't have to look at our own stuff. Does that resonate? Yeah? Great. All right. How about one more? Anybody want to add to the conversation? Want to have the last word? No? Okay. Yeah, so I think that what Becky shared is really spot on. It is a big awareness problem, right? And it's what I shared when I was over there talking to that table was it's tricky because the people in this room have the awareness most of the time, right? And so in my conversations with you, you're saying this is what I think the problem is, but they don't see the problem. And I don't want to say the problem because that could be offensive. And I don't know if I'm authorized to say that or empowered to say that. I don't want to offend anyone. And so, it's a weird dance, right? And sometimes I see a lot of organizations where, the top HR person is responsible for facilitating executive meetings and conversations. And that's a really uncomfortable position to be in. So again, my goal here really is to provide a framework that helps name this problem. And the reason that I had everybody talking about it and sharing was because I think we have to normalize it, right? Like, this isn't a Acme Corporation problem. This is a problem, right? I see it every day in organizations of all shapes and sizes and industries. It doesn't matter. And so you don't need to feel uncomfortable about calling out the problem because it's not personal, right? Like, this is a phenomenon. This is happening as companies grow and scale. Again, in every city. I don't know what's happening. Ooh, I'm losing microphones. It's happening in every city, in every industry, companies of all sizes. And it happens like at different inflection points. So just because you solve it at one inflection point doesn't mean that it's solved. It will keep happening if you're not on top of it, right? Because that's just the way that cities grow. We have to keep building infrastructure. It's just like that. And so really my goal, again, is to empower you as HR leaders to have a language that you can use to make yourselves more strategic as business partners to the organization, right? To say like, hey, this is what I'm seeing, and here's what this is called. This actually has a name, and it's called leadership debt, and it happens in companies of all shapes and sizes as they grow. And it's an infrastructure problem, right? We have to scale our systems as our company grows. So just real quick, I'm going to share a couple of case studies. So I'm going to kind of breeze over this because I'm now running a little bit short on time. But this was a $250 million construction company that had a new 5-year strategic plan. They had new values. And through their employee survey, what they learned was that they weren't living their values. I'll just put it that way. And so they had a desire to create a values-driven behavioral competency model for their managers. And we did that for them. So we went out, we did a bunch of insights interviews. We learned, like, what does this value mean to you? How does that show up? What does that mean when it's modeled? And then we created a competency model, and we built a leadership development program around that. We facilitated that program. It was a 6-month program. It had lots of wraparound pieces with peer success pods and coaching tip sheets and pre and post surveys and all the things. And the result was that it was exceptionally successful in terms of pre and post program metrics, right? Every competency that we were looking to build improved by an average of 23% over 6 months. So the client was super happy with it. But this is really what I want to highlight. At the end of all of our programs, we have a reflection and celebration event where we bring all the participants together, we reflect on the experience, people share what it meant to them, what stood out, what their big takeaways are. And someone came up to me after this particular event when the results were super successful, and she said to me, I really loved this program. I got a lot out of it. I feel like I'm a better manager. And I just wanted to share with you that we're really frustrated that we've been asked to invest time in this program when our executive leaders are not on the same page with each other, and they do not model the behaviors that you're now asking us to model, or that they're now asking us to model. And that really, I was like, wow, yes, I feel you, I hear you, I see you. There are lots of people who feel this way after participating in these programs. And we have to make space for that. And we have to share that feedback back with executive leaders, right? Because what this does is it creates resentment and it creates distrust, right? And then that creates a schism between executive leadership and everybody else. And so I think these are the things that we don't talk about. We just post all the success metrics. I could do that all day. But like, this is how people are feeling after some of these programs. So this is a different organization that is a high growth portfolio of specialty beverage companies. They were underperforming across the board, all 5 portfolios. They had negative EBITDA, which is a metric of the company's performance, and they were in jeopardy of breaching their debt covenants, which basically means they had a loan from the bank and you have certain requirements you have to meet, and they were not meeting those requirements, so they were about to get their loan called. And their executive team was super overwhelmed. They were misaligned, they were burnt out. They had grown pretty much overnight, doubled in size because they acquired a big company on the West Coast, and they just didn't know what to do with that level of growth. Their team just was not equipped to handle it. The pressure was high, the momentum was low, and decisions were stalled. So in this case, we were asked to lead an executive team relaunch. So this is an example of where we started at the top, right? We used our proprietary approach to reset the team, where we reset roles, we created role definition, who's doing what by when, what is the work, how are we going to do it together, we rebuilt trust, and we installed a teaming structure that was really needed to lead a much bigger organization. And over 6 months, we partnered closely with that team, providing hands-on support and coaching. And within 30 days, really, the team was making a tremendous amount of progress. They were making quicker decisions. They had more clarity on their strategic direction. They had more cohesion. By 90 days, 4 out of the 5 portfolio companies were performing and hitting key metrics. And within 6 months, that was true of all 5. And they returned the company to positive EBITDA within that period. More importantly, this team was really energized. They weren't just performing, but they were leading with more confidence, and that was trickling all the way down into their teams. So in this case, the client said, as a result of our work together, our senior leadership team gained increased alignment, which increased our ability to lead the rest of our organization with clarity of focus, consistent language, and streamlined process. All of this empowered our teams to be more productive. We're now able to achieve more with less energy leakage, creating a very positive impact on our bottom line. So this is an example of when you make the right investment in the right place, it impacts everyone. It has a trickle-down effect. Whereas when you make an investment in the middle without doing the foundational work, you start to see those gaps. So really, HR leaders are very uniquely positioned inside of your organizations to see where leadership debt is forming long before it becomes a business crisis. And so I really, again, want to empower you to really lean into that role. Lean into your role as, the truth teller, right? Lean into your role with your unique perspective. You're sitting at the intersection of strategy and people, and you have a lot more awareness oftentimes than the people who are making some of the big decisions. And so the first thing you can do is name leadership debt. So that's really why we created this model, was to name this phenomenon and this problem that we're seeing across the board inside of growing organizations. So I hope that this framework allows you and empowers you to do that. I think it gives a language that executives can understand, right? And we need to normalize it. So you can be an agent in doing that. And then diagnose where the leadership debt exists. So use tools like the Leadership Debt Index to understand where it lives in your organization, not as a matter of judgment, but just to say, hey, here's a benchmark of where we are. Now we have some awareness. What are we going to do with that? And again, I'll give you an opportunity to pilot that index in just a minute. And then third, advocate for investing in the correct sequence. This isn't always possible, but in your role as a business partner, you have the ability to sort of lobby, if you will, right, to educate. That's how I see my role, frankly, is like, I have to educate people on the complexity of this problem. And so do you, right? They think it's a lot simpler because they hear things out there in the world about leadership development programming and whatnot. But all of us are responsible for educating about the complexity of this problem and what it really takes to solve it. And so you can start doing that and help build maturity from the top to maximize impact and ROI. And the last thing I would say about this, which I was thinking about getting into this today and I just didn't think I'd have time and I didn't. But along with this, you really need to position yourself to be able to articulate the cost to the business. What is this problem costing the business? And you may be thinking, like, I didn't go into HR to do math. I didn't either. I don't like math. But we have to be able to speak that language because CEOs like math. They just do. Private equity firms, they really like math. So we have to be able to speak that language, and we have to understand how to calculate what these problems, what these symptoms are actually costing the business. And there are ways to do that. I have like lots of data. I could geek out with you all day. So hit me up if you would benefit from kind of talking through that kind of formula. So just a couple practical takeaways, some questions you could ask your executive teams to kind of get this conversation started is, are our executives aligned on our organization's top priorities? Are senior leaders accountable for enterprise success? Or is it really just for their functional area? And are our managers struggling because of a skill gap? Or could it be because the leadership conditions above them are unclear or unhealthy? And it could be both and, right? Could be both and. So just a recap of where we've been, we talked about leadership debt, what it is and how it builds. We talked about the antidote to leadership debt, which is leadership maturity, and also the correct sequence in which leadership maturity must be built from the top down or from the bottom up, laying that really strong foundation. And then we also talked last about HR's strategic role in helping overcome the inverted investment problem to drive business performance. So like I said, we're going to give you the first opportunity to pilot the Leadership Debt Index. This is going to be on a QR code that I'll flip to in just a second. It's also on the flyer that's in front of you at your table. So it's part of a survey that you can opt in to taking the Leadership Debt Index if you want. It's solely optional. We would love your feedback on today's presentation. I'd love to hear what spoke to you, what didn't speak to you, what you wanted to know more of. I am going to open it up to Q&A, so feel free to ask lots of questions. But the more constructive feedback, the better. And at the end of the survey, you will have an opportunity to say, yes, I'd like to take the Leadership Index assessment. If that's the case for you, then you do need to provide your contact information because it will come via email, and the results also will come via email. You'll also have a chance to sign up for some of our complimentary events that we host for HR leaders. Again, that's totally optional. So even if you don't want to do any of that and you don't want contact information shared, that's awesome. Please still answer the survey. It's very helpful to us. And I will share it back with Shirley and the great folks at SHRM. So here is my contact information. I would love to connect with all of you. You've got my phone number, my email, hit me up on LinkedIn. That's typically where I am in terms of social media. You can check out our website. And then this is the QR code to the survey, which also will have the opt-in for the Leadership Debt Index. Yes?
Can you share this deck with us?
Sure, yeah. I don't know what the mechanics are of doing that, but I'll figure that out. Yeah, for sure. Okay, I think we have not very much time for Q&A, but I'm happy to stick around. So do we have a few minutes, Shirley?
You have about a minute.
I have a minute. Does anyone have a burning question? A 1 minute burning question? Oh, I've been given 5 minutes. What questions do you have? Yes.
Do you agree or disagree when it comes to leadership, management, executives, that eventually you peak? And I don't mean that in a negative way. Everyone reaches a capacity where it's just like, no. At what point, or how should the comfortability level be when you're ready to tell your team, not that I'm retiring, but I'm peaked, and I would like to allow someone else to introduce new ideas because I've literally peaked, and I'm okay with learning from someone else. As an executive or a senior leader, how would you think translating that to a team without losing your credibility would look like? I know it's so loaded.
Yeah. So remind me your name. Carissa. Carissa asked whether I agree or disagree that people peak, that leaders peak at some point in their career, and what would it look like to share some version of that with a team and then make space for someone else to step up. So that is a loaded question, I think. Yeah. So I think it's yes and. I think some people will reach a ceiling in their organization where they do cap out. I think that generally speaking, people are able to grow. That's my belief. I'm a coach. Like I think that when you're growth minded and you're always leaning into curiosity and growth and opportunities to grow yourself and learn and develop, it's hard for me to like wrap my head around the idea that there's a peak for people, but I think that that is true for some people, and some people just aren't curious and aren't really open to learning or growing. So I think it's more that, but I think that it's an awareness thing, right? Like we talked about awareness before. So a lot of people don't necessarily have that awareness. I will also share with you transparently that I work with a lot of executives who have a very difficult time retiring. They just do. They're mostly men, by the way. It's just a fact. So I think that there's a lot there. You know what I mean? And I think if you're ready to retire, that's awesome. Like I'm ready to retire. I daydream about that every day. So I think you can do that and make space for other people without necessarily having to share like, hey, I've reached my limit, you know, I'm out. So I think those two things might be a little bit separate. Yeah, but thank you for the question.
You can recognize the resistance to grow or peace, and then they're like, no, I'm growing, and you're like, you're not.
Yeah, different people have a different tolerance for growth and change and curiosity. Yeah, that can be frustrating for people who are tremendously growth minded. Yeah, sure. What other questions do you have? Okay. Well, I'm going to wrap it up then, and I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions that you might have.